Okay. So I don't know what's wrong with my laptop. It does not seem to want to connect to the internet and go live on YouTube. So I'm having to use my iPad. And whenever I use my iPad, it's a little bit more difficult to upload the videos after I'm done. I don't know why they don't want to upload, but they don't. So it makes it a little bit harder to replay the live whenever the video doesn't upload. Let me look and see if the last one did. I can't even remember if the one that I did from last night, if it did upload or not. So let me see. "22 hours ago." Okay, so it did. It did upload. That's good. I didn't think that it did, but it did. So sometimes I never know if it is going to upload or not. So I am glad to see that it did. Give me just 1 second. Because when I use, oh, and it doesn't automatically put on the monetization. So I have to go back in and make sure that monetization is checked in order to monetize on the live. It's just a lot more work to do whenever I upload from the iPad rather than from my laptop. But for whatever reason, the laptop does not want to connect to the internet right now. So, how was everyone's day? Oh my gosh, what a day it was for me. I don't know if you guys saw that video that I posted last night about the old dog that was getting groomed. I realize watching older dogs getting groomed can be very emotional for some people, but to get on my page and assume that I'm not being compassionate because you're emotionally triggered by my post is incredibly offensive. And calling me abusive is like, it's just crazy. Like, I cannot understand how people can use the word abusive so casually, because there are real situations out there where humans, animals, and children are really being abused. And my video is not a depiction of any sort of abuse in any way at all. So to even suggest that it is highly offensive and very, very dangerous, because it sets a precedent to where me as a groomer am unable to do my job without people accusing of being abusive. Just because you don't like the way things look in the video does not mean that the dog is being mishandled, and it does not mean that the dog is being abused. That's just something that you just can't go around and say shit like that. Like, I don't understand why people do that, why people get so upset and start screaming abuse. It's so dangerous to do that. And as a dog groomer, I have seen, like, firsthand, I have seen what animal abuse actually looks like. And I can assure you that my video is nowhere near a depiction of what animal abuse is. Not in the slightest. At all. Whoops. I'm trying to figure out how to put the phone so you guys can see me. Because, yeah, I'm on my iPad, so it makes it a little bit different. A little different. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get to the book because I do not want to give these people any more of my time and attention because they do not deserve that. I guess they feel like they need to be heard, and it's just like, whatever. You want to be heard? Okay, I heard you. But I literally could not care less about your opinion, especially of me and my work, based on a fucking video that you weren't there for. Okay, so we did chapters. I can relate to it a lot too. There's so much good information, more information in this book that I initially thought was going to be in it. So I think that that's what makes it really enjoyable. I cannot remember if we did chapter 5 because I was playing it on. Are you there? Okay, so I need to go with chapter 5, which this chapter is called Toxic Waters. It's kind of a short chapter. We may go into chapter 6, which is protection. We may not. I might just start with chapter 6 tomorrow because chapter 6 is a really long chapter.
Chapter 5. Toxic Waters. Mother hunger doesn't
Let me know if you
arise
can hear
in a
it.
vacuum. Mother hunger is created and transmitted within a culture that obscures our human need for one another and prioritizes men over women. Mother hunger is part of a much bigger picture that frightens women and compromises our ability to protect ourselves and our daughters. Before we talk about the essential maternal element of protection, we need to take a look at the cultural context that makes it difficult for a mother to keep her daughter safe. Protection is a positive human attribute that ensures the survival of the species. Symbolically and literally, maternal love represents protection, standing between a child and life's hardships. A child can endure many threats if she knows her mother is there for her. The term mama bear speaks to the universal protective instinct wired into female physiology that is activated when a woman becomes a mother. Designed to ensure the survival of the next generation, mothers experience neurochemical activity that enhances attention and proximity seeking. Maternal protection is part of nature's plan to keep infants and children safe while they are too vulnerable to protect themselves. Unfortunately, cultural influences can obscure nature's design. What kind of world makes it difficult for a mother to protect her child? The answer to this question involves a discussion of patriarchy, from the Greek meaning, quote, rule of the father. I've been writing and teaching about patriarchy, misogyny, and the construction of gender for over 30 years. So when I stumbled on Anjali Dayal's interview on the radio show On Being, I was thrilled with her fresh, clear explanation. Dayal, at the time a research fellow at Georgetown University's Institute for Women, Peace and Security, shares David Foster Wallace's graduation speech, This is Water, to make a point. In Wallace's anecdote, two young fish swimming along Meet an older fish who calls out, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The two young fish continue swimming for a bit before one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?"
Mm-hmm.
The meaning is clear. We're often wholly unaware of the environment that shapes us. Dial brilliantly connects this water with patriarchy in the following quote: "Patriarchy is evident in the everyday violence against women. It is reflected in the battlements we build to protect ourselves, the little accommodations, the things you do reflexively to keep yourself from being hurt while you walk around, all the subtle ways you protect yourself from being alone with some men in offices and other men in cars and all unknown men in large empty buildings. Every time you've ignored the lewd comment from a man on the street or at a bar or at a party because who knows what he'll do if you lash out.
Right.
The quick scan of a subway car when the train pulls into the station to ensure that there are enough people so you won't be alone if someone threatens you, but not so many people that you'll get groped without being able to place the hands. 1,000 transgressions so small and so regular that you never name them to anyone, because that's just the way life is. The psychobiological, social, and spiritual impact of growing up in patriarchal water means we swallow mainstream ideas about women without realizing it, even when these ideas are damaging. We as women become versions of the gender stereotype. The way the culture looks at us is the way we see ourselves. The way the culture feels about us is the way we feel about ourselves. Internalizing patriarchal ideology isn't a cognitive process. We don't consciously wake up one day and decide to devalue ourselves. It's much more insidious.
It's programmed.
We simply swim in feminine constructs that tell us how to behave, how to look, who to love as we grow and develop. And sometimes we learn this from our mothers. Cultural factors that contribute to mother hunger. Growing awareness of the mother wound, matrilineal burden that manifests in women and is passed on from generation to generation, gives us the framework for understanding the origin of mother hunger. Mothers carrying their own victimization pass it on to their daughters. Self-loathing and contempt corrupt the mother-daughter bond as hatred of women is shared. A mother's victimization does not merely humiliate her, it mutilates her daughter, who watches her for clues as to what it means to be a woman. Like the traditional foot-bound Chinese woman, she passes on her affliction. The mother's self-hatred and low expectations are binding rags for the psyche of the daughter. Dr. Oscar Serralak describes the transmission of the mother wound by explaining the cultural forces that require women, quote, to internalize the dysfunctional coping mechanisms learned by previous generations of women. Serralak describes the mother wound as, quote, the pain and grief that grow in a woman as she tries to explore and understand her power and potential in a society that doesn't make room for it. Mother hunger, in part, is a legacy of the mother wound, passed from grandmother to mother to daughter. The belief that women are somehow less than men damages our bond with each other as we pass our internalized beliefs about our body, worth, and power to the next generation. The unconscious and epigenetic processes that teach us to be feminine occur without our consent. Many of us struggle with body shame and limiting beliefs, lessons from our mothers. We watched our mothers starve. We witnessed their boredom and anxiety. We saw them betray their friends and themselves. As a result, many of us have no idea how or why we struggle. To us, it is simply normal. #MeToo. It seems each decade brings fresh attempts to reverse toxic masculinity and rebalance power between men and women. Toxic masculinity is built on a false belief in the superiority of men. While it might have...
I'm going to pause for 1 second. I think the reason why the patriarchy has for so long tried to convince women that women are inferior to men is because men are trying to oppress women, because they know that if we collectively stand together as a species, we are much more powerful together than men are, because women are natural leaders and men are not. Men need to take direction and they need like orders, like in the military. But when you have men trying to convince women that we are an inferior species to the men, it's by design. They want us to feel like they are better than they want us to feel like they are better than we are, because they're scared that if we know how powerful we are, we will overtake the men and be more in power. And they don't want that. They don't want women in power.
Here that certain men, white, heterosexual men, benefit from this setup. In truth, toxic masculinity is damaging to men too, because the rules of what a man can feel, how he can behave, or what he must achieve force limited access to feelings and vulnerability, the very qualities a man needs to connect with his partner, his children, and himself. In 1975, Laura Mulvey taught us about the male gaze, the way we collectively view women as objects, in her famous essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. Through media, collectively,
That's good,
we learn
Gary.
that women
That's
exist
amazing.
for the visual pleasure of men. But since we all look at the same things, women learn to see ourselves and each other this way, as objects. Renee Englund, psychology professor at Northwestern University, identifies the enduring quality of the male gaze, explaining how the female body, quote, is seen as something that exists just to make other people happy.
That's by design.
The male
also.
gaze teaches us that to be visible, we must be groomed, thin, and young. We must tease, flirt, and exhibit ourselves. Visibility makes us vulnerable. Feminists in the U.S. coined the term rape culture in the 1970s to describe a society where sexual violence is normalized and victims are blamed for sexual harassment and assault.
That's been forever, though.
Rape culture emphasizes don't get raped instead of don't rape. Emily Butchwald, Pamela Fletcher, and Martha Roth, editors of Transforming a Rape Culture, describe rape culture as, quote, a complex system of beliefs that encourages male aggression and supports violence against women.
Mm-hmm.
It is a society where violence is seen as sexy and sexuality as violent. In rape culture, women perceive a continuum of threatened violence that ranges from sexual remarks to sexual touching to rape itself. The 24-hour news cycle includes so much coverage of this continuum that violence against women seems unavoidable. The Me Too movement reminds us that in spite of all the years of hard work and waiting for things to change,
It doesn't.
a woman can still be pinned to a bed, cornered at a party, or groped while others stand by and watch.
And men will encourage other men to harm women. It's like some sick initiation ritual where you have to be abusive to a woman in order to be considered a man. Like, that's disgusting behavior. Disgusting behavior. But if you are so concerned about getting that adoration from other men, how far will you go? How far will you go to get the male attention that other men seem to crave so much? Will you abuse another woman to be in this quote unquote boys club, or will you stand up for what's right and say no and actually help the woman? Because 99% of the time they just stand back and watch, and they do not help women at all. They stand back and watch it happen and do nothing.
Watch. Women intuit that even if the news isn't about our story specifically, it could be. A culture of fear permeates the female psyche, complicating our ability to keep ourselves and our children safe, compromising the essential maternal element of protection. Pornography. Easy access.
Gary, women do not choose to be abused. It's a psychological problem that takes place before any physical abuse ever happens. Women do not choose to be in relationships that are abusive. They are already in those relationships when they become abusive. And sometimes it's marriage, the birth of a child, or getting engaged or something like that, that causes the man to react more abusively towards the female. But it always starts with emotional and verbal and psychological abuse first. And if you are already in a position where you do not have good self-esteem or high confidence, you believe that you can't do any better than this person that's standing right in front of you, even though they are harmful to you emotionally, verbally, and psychologically. It usually starts with psychological abuse, where they make little comments about, oh, I would never date somebody like you, but I'm gonna go ahead and give you a chance, to try to make you feel like you're lucky to be in their presence. And those small little red flags can be easy to ignore right at first, right? Especially for somebody who has little to no confidence.
Access to pornography adds difficulty for parents who want to protect their children. Pornography flourishes in rape culture, and it is now available 24/7 on handheld devices. As a result, children are seeing pornography more than ever before. A recent British survey found that 12% of children under the age of 12 regularly watch pornography. While pornography can be a helpful way for adults to explore disenfranchised parts of sexual preferences and dreams, when children accidentally find pornography, it can be terrifying.
Oh God, I can imagine.
Mixed fear and arousal, and the brain is overwhelmed. While advocates fight to protect children from the adverse impact of pornography, a generation of kids are growing up learning about sex from porn in spite of their mother's protective efforts. Pornography as sex education is problematic for many reasons, which include but aren't limited to a deep misunderstanding about gender, sexuality, power, and emotional intimacy. Gail Dines, author of Pornland and president and CEO of Culture Reframed, sees the widespread infiltration of pornography as a public health crisis. She describes our modern rape culture as pornified culture and explains how porn creates boys with less empathy and more likelihood of sexual aggression. Sexual alarm. Women acquire biological adaptations to endure constant threat. We are braced for danger with a regular dose of adrenaline and cortisol. As we grow, our personality develops in a type of defense mode. Defense mode may explain why some of us are angry, loud, and aggressive, while others are furtive, hypervigilant, and withdrawn. Judith Levitt, in her book, The Sexual Alarm System, explains how women are so accustomed to sexual fear that without our awareness, our bodies are constantly on guard, like a low-level hum. Levitt calls this adaptation the sexual alarm system, SAS. The SAS keeps us on high alert, preparing us for, quote, the possibility of abuse, because we know it's possible and we are alert and watching for it. Otherwise, we would go out for a walk anywhere at any time of night, or travel freely anywhere in the world, or not worry about the men on the street following us. She says, the SAS blares out at women to watch out. They are prey. They then go through becoming wired, getting triggered, going on high alert, and finally withdrawing and shutting down. Phew, this is stressful and exhausting, and it affects many aspects of women's lives. Most men do not experience the SAS because they are not, in fact, sexual prey. A personality of defense starts early. From a young age, we learn we aren't safe because our body is an object that can be sexually exploited and violated.
And
The sexual alarm system is a product of patriarchal culture. Constantly guarded. The instincts that drive us to appease someone who has real or perceived power over us diminish our chances for full relational participation. Thus, many of us have never experienced a healthy romantic partnership because relational reciprocity is a foreign experience. Toward our own protection, we appease and please someone else's needs for food, sex, adoration, or even money. The need to appease someone with power, perceived or real, is our biological freeze response in action, our adaptation to chronic, ongoing fear. Female bodies in patriarchy are adapted to danger. According to Dr. Shelley Taylor, women respond differently to danger than men do. In her groundbreaking work, now widely known as the tend and befriend theory, Taylor found that women demonstrate more social behaviors in response to a threat. Prior to her study, published in 2000, we assumed that the only biological response to fear was either fight or flight. Our information was based on male physiology. Taylor's research focused on women instead of men and set out to explore other ways we respond to danger.
It makes sense.
Her theory posits that fighting or fleeing are less advantageous for women who have babies and children depending on them. Women are therefore more at risk than males in terms of injury or dislocation when someone or something is dangerous. For this reason, she found that women tend cook, groom, or stroke their offspring, and befriend, gather, talk, connect with others when frightened. In another study examining gender differences, a group of men and women were informed that they would experience an electric shock. In the course of the experiment, women chose to wait for the shock with other participants, while the men dispersed and waited alone. The tend and befriend theory makes sense when we think about how women have better chances of survival when they stick together, as do their children. What accounts for this difference in fear response between men and women? It's undetermined whether it's biology or sociology, but for understanding mother hunger, the distinction isn't critical. In fact, I think different fear responses may relate to our attachment style as much as to gender. Regardless, Taylor's theory helps us appreciate the power of the sexual alarm system and why we may appease, tend, or befriend rather than flee when threatened. Appeasing with a purpose. A deeper understanding of our human fear response allows more compassion for ourselves when some of us unconsciously appease an angry partner before soothing or protecting children. Our mind rapidly determines at some deep level where automatic survival resources kick in that soothing an angry adult is the safest option for everyone. Melissa Corbel, staff attorney at the Victim Rights Law Center.
I think as women, we've also kind of been conditioned to believe that if we disagree or don't submit to what it is the man wants, that they will either become violent or they will throw a mantrum to the point where it ruins your entire day if they don't get what it is that they want. Or, like I said, they will become violent and they will react harshly through physical violence towards you. So sometimes it seems like the best thing to do is just to give in to whatever it is that they want out of protection for yourself, either protection for your emotional well-being so that you're not, stuck in a house with a man child who is screaming and crying because he's not getting what he wants, or protecting yourself physically and emotionally and psychologically so that you aren't abused because he's not getting what it is that he wants.
And monthly contributor for Rumpus gives us a powerful illustration of appeasing in action. In her article titled, "Sometimes You Make Your Rapist Breakfast," Inside the Controversial and Often Confusing Tending Instinct of Women, she writes this: "You can only push a man off you so many times. You can only say, 'Not now, no thanks, I don't want to,' so many ways. I too have had sex I didn't want because sex was the least bad option. Sex was a known variable. Think of it as harm reduction tactic.
Yep.
Fighting and screaming and kicking and yelling at a man, unknown outcomes. Would he hit me back? Would he let me go? Would I fight and lose? If I lost, would he have sex with me anyway? Only more violently." Corbel captures the essence of the appeasing response. Appeasing behavior may be less risky than fighting or running. So we can understand how surrendering to unwanted sexual aggression is about survival, a resourceful, pre-conscious harm reduction tactic. As children, many of us learn to appease our mother as a harm reduction tactic. Rather than risk an angry mother, appeasing her meant we kept the house clean, complimented her appearance, kept her company, or stayed out of her way when she was irritated. Pleasing and appeasing is similar to a trauma response. It's an automatic, unconscious reaction that can become an ingrained personality trait. Chapter 6.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here because chapter 6 is kind of a long chapter and it's about protection. And I think that we should start the next chapter or tomorrow with protection, because it is definitely going to be a good chapter. I did not expect for this chapter to be as informative as it was. When I thought about getting this book, I did not expect it to go into some of the topics that it is going into. So I am really pleasantly surprised to not just get the psychological stuff for, not having your mother and how that impacts you, but all this other information as well. Like, I didn't expect that. So it's a nice surprise to have. Hey, Laurel. So it's a nice surprise to have. And I'm really glad that we're reading this book. There's a lot of really great information in this book. The chapters are not very, very long. We'll start tomorrow with chapter 6. And we can probably do chapter 7 as well, chapter 6 and 7. And then the next day we'll do chapter 8. That one's a pretty long chapter. And then after that, we'll do chapter 9 and 10 and the conclusion. It didn't take as long to get through this book as it does my other books, I guess, because when I'm reading, I'm also like stopping and talking and engaging while I'm reading the book. So it feels like whenever I'm reading the book and we don't have it narrated, that it's taking a lot longer to get through. So maybe doing the audiobook is the best option to keep us on some sort of keep us on track so that I'm not holding us behind. I think it's good to have a little bit of a discussion though whenever we are reading. So that's why I do like to chit chat in between. So did you get to listen? Yes, audiobooks are so good. I listen to them sometimes when I'm working because I get like in the zone when I'm working, and having the audiobook playing in the background, it's like I'm retaining the information a little bit better. I'm paying attention to it because I'm focused on not only the book, but I'm also focused on what it is that I'm doing. So I love audiobooks, and I have quite a few more that we're going to get into. I'm just really enjoying this book. I didn't expect to enjoy it this much. I mean, I expected to enjoy it. I just didn't expect all the information that's in it. It's going over so many topics. Laurel, what kind of books do you like to read? I like all kinds of books. I'm not really into romance novels. I do like fiction, nonfiction, self-help. So I like listening to a lot of different books. Anything that I feel like I can learn something from, I'm all about reading. I like to be educated while I'm reading because I feel like that's the easiest way to grasp new information and really, oh, cool, and really like comprehend new information and also learn. So I don't think I've ever read a fantasy book. What would be considered fantasy? I probably shouldn't have done the rose, those two different dark colors. Maybe I can even it out with a different, like a more neutral red or pink. Maybe something like this. Let's see. Nope. Fablehaven. I don't think I've ever heard of that. Is that the same damn pink? That might be the same pink. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's so cold today. Yeah, that's the same damn pink. That's all good. I'll use it anyway. It's supposed to go down tonight to below freezing, so like 26 degrees. Okay, let me go so I can go ahead and start getting ready for the evening. If you all have any suggestions for books, if you want to join the book club, I'm here every night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, except for Saturday evenings. Saturday evenings, that's my night off. We do have quite a list of books that are already on the reading list, but if you have any suggestions, I'm definitely open to those suggestions. You can put them in the comments. And romantasy, that's cute. I can see where that would be interesting. Kind of like living in a different alternate universe in a way. That's what that rose looks like now. Let's see. See you later. That's when that one, that was the one I was working on the last couple of days. There was a lot of details in those. And that was the one that I worked on before. Oh, and this one. Okay, well, let me go so I can start getting ready. It's so good to have you here. I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are going to be going over chapters 6 and 7, which is protection and guidance. I'm really excited to get to the protection because I can already imagine there's going to be some really great information on how we can all take care and protect ourselves from not just harmful, stuff that our mothers did, but from other people in the world as well. I'll see you guys later. Love you.